I'm sad because I already filmed this video once and I've already put my books away. And honestly, I'm upset that I filmed a lot of videos and they all had no audio and we're in slow-mo. How could this happen to me? We're just getting layovers for now. I'm so sorry. Hey, what's up? I'm Allie and welcome back to my channel. I read around 80 some things in 2024. I'm gonna be honest, a lot of those were rereads. I had no patience for like bad books in 2024. Listen, my love of reading is on the line, so we gotta make it good. But thankfully, I still managed to find at least 10 books that I really enjoyed. On top of that, 10 of the best books that I read in 2024. We're not there yet. I mean, I've already read a lot of good books already this year. Curse of Saints. This is about the only romantasy that stuck out to me within this past year. I feel like I've just been in a bit of a slump with romantasies. So many of them just feel like they're the same thing over and over. A woman who's an assassin for the queen. She is sent to work with her enemy, her least favorite person in the world, and he just happens to be so incredibly handsome and they just are so banterful back and forth together, you know, kind of deal. Things get a little complicated when dark magic starts getting involved, and then her magic starts acting very unusual and she gets pulled into something that like she really doesn't want any parts of. I love fantasies that take place like in city settings and have a lot of like political intrigue type stuff happening and like a lot of backstabbing and a lot of like assassin stuff. As much as I like adventure fantasy, I do think city-esque fantasy is more my jam. Now this of course is like medieval city-esque orders and everyone's tense and there's a lot of things happening. I like that stuff. I need to read the sequel. It's high on my list this year to read. Then we have Madame. I was in a dark academia mood, but I, again, have felt most dark academia isn't quite up to what I'm looking for most of the time. But I came across Madame, and I wasn't 100% sure what I was getting into. I saw a review that basically was like, knowing that this takes place in the 90s and knowing what we now know about things that were happening in the 90s, this is totally believable. And I was like, okay, I'm intrigued. What? We have a woman who basically gets accepted to be a teacher at this like prestigious school, boarding school for like girls, all girls school. Weird that they're like, no one ever seems to retire from there and they never seem to be hiring, but they've allowed her in. And she gets there and they're unusual. Like they have a very specific way of doing things and how the girls have to dress and even how she has to teach, to the point where like they won't let her know everything. They're like, once you get through this period, then we'll talk about other things and like don't go in these areas, and like it's all very suspicious. And she's like, okay. Then things start happening in her personal life as well, and she's like, something weird is going on. And then she finds out on top of that there was a girl who died while there, and there's no record of it. I just realized I've been staring at my mic thinking it was my lens. Rich people send their girls here, and about those connections, about like what is expected of them and how that affects the economy and how that affects politics and like what's expected and like all these things. And even though like I knew it was coming, when you're reading it, you know it's coming. And you're just like, you know the character has to be in denial, which is pretty much the only reason they're just like not quite seeing the full picture. And once it's revealed, it's still just absolutely like heart-wrenching, disgusting, and you're just like, oh my god. And the end is like wild. So I love this. I feel like it's very slow paced, but I think it's worth it. And there are a lot of discussions, like a lot of things that are happening are being paired to a lot of like classic literature and mythology. And that is what I want in my academia books. Where is the academia? This was the dark academia that I've been needing. Ballad of Tom Black is a horror novella. I'm so shocked at how big of an impact this had for how little amount of pages that it had. We follow a guy who is essentially, he's working in like the black market delivering occult items. And he's kind of like, I don't believe in that stuff, but he decides that he's gonna be better safe than sorry, and he kind of screws over one of his clients, and that comes back to bite him in the butt. He ends up getting deeply entwined into like this crazy dark madness stuff, and it all just like goes wild from there. It do a lot of like reflecting on society and racism, police brutality, as well as Lovecraftian and just like the racism that is underlining a lot of Lovecraftian type stuff. So I thought this was a really interesting book for being so short and very well written. I am so sad that I waited until now to read The Last House on Needless Street, despite the fact that so many people talked about it when it came out and it was recommended to me several times as well. Had me guessing till the end. It does something different. Now I know there can be a lot to be said about how this book handles some illnesses, but the author does feel like they went through a lot of research and care when it came to portraying some things, and I really appreciate the different spin that we get on that. We know that there is a killer on Needless Street, and we're from the point of view of a cat sometimes who lives with like his really weird owner, and then we're from the point of view of the owner, and like he lives in a boarded up house and he's not very social and like goes out into the woods and does weird things kind of deal. And then we have a woman who her sister went missing in this area years ago, and she thinks that she knows who the killer is, so she moves in. I loved listening to this. I couldn't quite guess where it was going. There were moments where I'm like, wait a minute. Am I losing my mind? Are we supposed to be losing our mind? Like, I'm questioning everything right now. And there were so many moments where I thought I had it figured out and it wasn't quite there. But it's also just like a really enjoyable story to read as well. Not just the mystery aspect, but there's so many other aspects to it that I was just like, okay, well now I'm invested in this and now I'm invested in this. And I'm kind of sad that I waited so long to get to it. This is a book that I read at the very beginning of the year. Like one of the first books that I read in the year was The God of Everything. This is not going to be everyone's cup of tea. I already know this, but I love a good like slow story when it comes to talking about like mythology and gods, but also this book is about vampires. We follow a woman and she is a vampire, and it follows kind of like her modern day. It also talks about when she first became a vampire. Early settlements, humanity type deal, and all the things that she's done up to this point, and that she got to live in a time when there were gods and people believed in gods, and how over time we've like lost that, and how she has handled loss and all these other things over the centuries, and how she's handling it now. And she's a teacher, and it talks about some of the struggles that she's having as well currently in her life, and like she feels like a god is coming for her again after all these years. And it was a really fascinating story. I really enjoyed it. It really tugged at my heartstrings, and it was a really unique version of a vampire story. I feel like some people have tried to do less romanticized version of a vampire story, but it doesn't quite, there's just things missing, and I feel like this was it. It's like that agony and that time, and I do think that it's a longer, slower book so that you also have to suffer a bit through the time of it all. And I really thought it was brilliant. Just saying, I don't think it's going to be everyone's thing, but I really liked it. I got it already in my top 5. Of course, I have to put Sunbringer on this list, which is the sequel to Godkiller. Godkiller is one of my favorite books. It's just so good. Of course, I had to put it on here. Several different characters. We're in a world where the gods have been outlawed. A war has broken out. Humans have defeated the gods, but there's still some around. And we follow a god killer who has to go around and defeat gods as they pop up, essentially. And we also follow a knight who was in this war. He's since retired, but he finds out that his friend, the king, might be dying and needs help from a god. So he has to go hunt down a god. He likes gods. He meets our god killer. And they're stuck together. And on top of that, they're stuck with a kid who's stuck with a god. I love fantasy books where a god is being fought, or gods are being fought, and I really like this world that has been built. The world is just so brilliant, and to me, they feel more real. The way these characters interact within their environments just feel much more realistic than I would have ever thought from a fantasy. I just love this world so much. The third one, and I think the last one comes out this year, and I'm very sad about it. One of the best books I think I have ever read was Grown. Really took me by surprise at how emotional I got during it. It's not really something that I read from a lot, where it's like a hard-hitting contemporary older teen young woman who she has quite a talent, and she catches the eye of a famous singer, and he decides he's going to take her under her wing. We know early on that something is happening, and this really does talk about grooming and the abuse that happens to a lot of young people who get within the music industry. And I was reading this when a lot of the Diddy stuff was coming out, so a lot of this was really hitting hard, and it just had a lot to say about that. And it also, it's realistic because we see that it's happening, and our character's like, well, it wouldn't happen to me. I know better. I'm smart. And while she is, you think that you'll know when you see it, but you don't always. And it was a good story to express that, like, anyone, it can happen to anyone, but also, like, be wary. And the industry is so much like this all the time. And it was just a very sad, depressing, but also very needed story. And I just it felt like I was reading, unfortunately, someone's memoir. Like, we've heard these stories so many times, but it was so well written. It was so well done. I wish I owned a copy of I Was a Teenage Slasher. Oh my god, I love slasher books, I love final girl books, and I love Stephen Graham Jones. This was so fun. If you like kind of classic horror movies, this is so good. I do feel like this does fit into anyone who likes Scream or Ghostface would fall into this, because it's more of like humorous, kind of make fun of horror movies in a way. Teenage boy, something has happened to him. Basically how it takes it is that there's like this paranormal type of entity that like comes into him. It's kind of like Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, they're all kind of like supernatural in a way. So we have the supernatural like entity that has come into him and makes him want to be a killer now. And he doesn't want to be. He's like, I don't want to do that. But this has happened, and now we have to figure it out. So him and his best friend are on this chase to like basically try to figure out how not to be the teenage slasher while also all these things are happening. I saw something coming early on, and I was like, no, like, oh no, and it just broke my heart. But it's such a good book. I think when a humorous and also like horrific story can make you feel that way, it's done a really good job. And oh, so good. So good. I just love these types of stories. They're some of my favorites. Speaking of more horror, this is not one I would recommend lightly to people, but this is the one that when I had talked about making this video on my stream, everyone was like, oh, Allie's gonna talk about the eyes are the best part. I am. Only number 2 though. This is a fantastic book about sexism and racism and trauma. And I love that this is a horror story about trauma in women without doing traumatic things to women, especially of the sexual variety. We follow a Korean woman. Her mother starts dating this white man, and he is just gross. Oh god, like he's such a prick. And she starts fantasizing about like eating blue eyes. I had a moment where I was like, oh, blue eyes made me think of The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, which is another book, a great discussion piece about racism. Just like, it's different, because to me, like, the eating of the eye means I want to destroy you. I don't want to be you, I want to destroy you. And it was just a fascinating read, but it really is more of a take on society and how we treat women. And how women are exposed to these things every single day. But I love unhinged women horror. It's my favorite. It's my favorite of the whole genre. And then my favorite book, and again, I am so sad. The Diviners. This sat on my shelf for years, and you're telling me that I was just glancing at this absolute masterpiece for years without knowing it? The publishing industry does Liva Bray dirty. They give her some ugly covers. They do not do her justice, and she is a brilliant writer. So many people raved about it, but I'm like, whatever. It's so good. First of all, Roaring Twenties. Excellent job of like creating the atmosphere that is the Roaring Twenties and really talking about a lot of the influences, especially in New York. Like we have Prohibition and jazz clubs, and we have like religion, and also a lot of new technology and science, and like really pulls that in. But at the end of the day, this is a book about teens with superpowers, essentially, who accidentally are born with powers, who come together and are hunting down a demon. But the amount of culture that is referenced within, and just like the little snippets, like there were things that were like Bible and religious things that I was pulling, and I'm like, oh, I wonder if this will come into play in this and this, and just historical elements. It's very serious at times. I love these characters. They're so flawed. There's a decent amount of characters who have such different personalities, and they're all very well fleshed out, and they all have their own stories to tell. And I really do think that she does a good job balancing a lot of that. And I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed. And it's a slower paced book, and I enjoy that because I've just been like savoring these. And I've just been reading the whole series slowly because they're just so good. And I just think about I'm constantly just like, I just want to be in the world of the Diviners. Like, give me Roaring 20s Demon Hunters, give me that shit. Give me that shit. Anyway, those are my best books. Isn't that great? I really feel like I'm finally finding like my perfect taste in books, but we'll see. I'm sure it will change. As soon as I find it, it's going to change. Let me know if you have read any of these, how you feel about these, if you agree that some of these are amazing and fantastic. If not, don't tell me. You don't have to tell me. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next one. Okay, bye.